Welcome in, Loons fans, to another edition of the Matchday Preview. Jonathan Harrison here alongside Manny Lagos. Manny, how are we doing today? Another gorgeous day here in Minnesota. A difficult game to talk about coming up, but plenty to discuss across world soccer that has many in positive runs of form.
Yeah, I mean, I think the sun is up. It's officially summer in Minnesota. I mean, our this month is probably got to be our sunniest month of the year. So that's positive. That's a nice reminder that we're going through a tough stretch right now. But hopefully today we talk about the toughness. We also talk about the positives and how we're going to get out of it. So looking forward to the broadcast.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into it. This should be fun. We've got plenty to discuss. Let's start off with Euros and Copa America because the finals in those have been set. Spain, England in the Euros, and then Colombia and I'm blanking. Argentina in the final for Copa America. Let's start off with the Euros, and then we'll get your prediction for the Copa America. What are we expecting in the finals from each of those, and who do we expect to win?
Oh my gosh, I think it's a great matchup. Obviously, I think the England maybe didn't play the best soccer to get there, but fought and scraped and has built probably some pretty good resiliency and character where they believe they can win. Where versus Spain, that I think so far has probably been for me the best team in the tournament soccer wise. Maybe Germany's in there too, but Spain knocked them out early. So ultimately, I think it's probably the best playing team in the tournament against a team that's had to fight and scrape to get there, and now is maybe playing a little bit better than they had in the past and has learned a little bit about themselves as a group. So it's a great final. At the end of the day, that's going to be a great final for the Euros. Great semifinal games. That Spain-France game was amazing. And again, like I said, I'm really looking forward to it on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. That game coming up Sunday between Spain and England should be exciting to watch. I think, as you mentioned, England, for me, they didn't play the best soccer to watch in the tournament, but then in this semifinal, I think they played their best version of themselves, or one of their best versions of themselves that we've seen all tournament long. And I don't know what that means for the final because we know things change in the final, but it sets up a really interesting match for a team that just finally found its form versus a team that has been in form all tournament long. Spain has been one of the most fun teams to watch throughout the Euros. And
yeah, I do think, Jonathan, the matchups are fascinating. You know, again, I think England-Holland was a much better matchup for England based on the fact that as pragmatic as Koeman is as a coach and playing with a double pivot and still a little bit defensive, the Dutch have the history of total football and eventually open up and going forward. So I think that game lined up well for England to be a little bit more open and get their offensive players involved a little bit more in the game. And again, I think the Spain game is a much bigger task for them in terms of they won't have the ball as much and they will be able to counter. So that'll be interesting to see whether that means that Kane should be on the field or how long he should be on the field versus somebody's a little bit more active and mobile. It's been a tough tournament for Kane to really. He hasn't looked himself. He hasn't looked lively, and so that'll be a fascinating one for Southgate in terms of what kind of lineup he puts out there and the offensive numbers he wants on the field against a team like Spain. But certainly the semifinal match with the Netherlands, I thought it was a good matchup for England, and you saw a better version of England, I think, than earlier in the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads us right into the Copa America final. Argentina beating Canada 2-0, and then Colombia getting a win over Uruguay last night. An incredible game in that one. Just a physical match, a well-played match between those two sides. We're not going to really talk about the ugliness afterwards, but a incredible result for Colombia as they break a, what was it, a 20 plus year streak without going to a final. They now will face Argentina coming up Sunday night. That will be an incredible match in Miami.
Yeah, it will be. I do think Argentina, Colombia, and Uruguay have been the top three teams in the tournament. You can only have two teams in the final. And last night's, it was a street fight battle. Obviously, the red card, it just upped it a notch. And then it was just, whether it was the dark arts of Colombia, whether it was just the fighting and scraping of Uruguay to keep it at 1-0 and try to see if they can catch a goal. It was just really compelling soccer. And I guarantee you the stadium this weekend is probably going to be one of the best atmospheres for a soccer game ever in the history of U.S. soccer, just with the amount of Colombians and Argentinians that are going to just all be in Florida and Miami for this one. And it's exciting. Obviously, it's not only these two iconic countries, particularly Argentina and Colombia, trying to become maybe a top tier, kind of South American country. But you also now have maybe his last ever Copa America, the greatest soccer player of all time, playing in this game, trying to win another trophy. So it's going to be an awesome game. It's awesome that it's on American soil. I'm excited and jealous for anybody that can go to that game live, because that'll be probably, I think, one of the greatest sporting experiences in the history of U.S. sports.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. So let's put you on the spot here. It's a little bit earlier in the show than we normally do these, but predictions for these finals specifically.
Oh, I had Uruguay, so I'm already out in a sense from where I thought this was going. I'm gonna take Colombia with the upset here.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, I just think there was a lot of hunger and fight in them last night that I think they're going to recover and try to get for. Now they do have a one extra last day of rest, and they did have to play with 10 men, and they've got a lot of challenges to get healthy and regenerate for the kind of energy level to beat Argentina. But I'm gonna take Colombia sneaking the win here, and maybe a little bit of a shocker.
And then the Euros final.
I have to go with the team that's playing the best soccer. I'm a little biased too with my heritage there, so I do have to take Spain over England. I think one of the things I kind of said to audiences, I've really enjoyed Spain's evolution. They kind of evolved soccer in maybe a positive way to win with the possession and just over possession and ticky-tack, death by a thousand passes, etc. Between like the 2008 to 2012 era, where they won so much. I didn't necessarily love that, watching that type of soccer, but it was very effective. This new kind of vertical repress, win the ball, and then attack and decide how you want to kind of go at your opponent they've been playing in this tournament, to me, has been some of the best scintillating soccer I've seen in the last 5 years of any national team. So I'm rooting for that style to win, but I also know England has some of the best attackers in the world. So this to me is a really close matchup.
Yeah, I think I'm going Spain, and then I think I'm going to go against you on Copa America. I think Argentina pull it out. The team rallies around Messi playing in his most likely final Copa America. I've loved watching Colombia game in and game out at this tournament, but I just think there's something for Argentina that they'll find a little bit extra going into that final on Sunday. So yeah.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, we kind of touched on the Uruguay Colombia street fight, 10 men. The semifinal against Canada, I thought was an interesting game. I mean, personal level, we got a Loon who contributed, almost got 2 goals, had some great movement at the end of the game, 2 great chances, 2 great saves. Well, one was a great save, the other one was just wide. But I also thought it was an interesting game in that, Argentina kind of let Canada have the ball in certain spots, which was probably to rest Messi a little bit. And so but once they went to a certain area of the field, it was like all in, winning the ball back, which really opened up a lot of space for Messi. And I thought it was one of Messi's best looking games of the tournament so far. So it was a really interesting game tactically. And I thought Canada battled well, but also just showed the quality of Messi and Argentina is really overwhelming.
You mentioned Canada there, getting to the semifinals, the only CONCACAF team to do it. What did we think of what we saw from, was this the first 5 or 6 games of Jesse Marsh's era as the Canadian men's national team manager? What did we think of what he's been able to instill on that team in his first handful of games here?
Well, certainly the lead up was interesting in that they had a 4-0 loss to Netherlands and a 0-0 tie against France, which, at the time I was like, that is a great tie for Canada and well done, Jesse. But then when I've seen kind of France's weird non-able attacking in the Euros, maybe it wasn't quite as big, because they were horrible attacking in the Euros.
Yeah.
I thought they were just so defensive. But long story short, we're on this podcast. I'm going to throw it back to you, Jonathan. We know today is a huge announcement about Greg Berhalter, and there's no way that we don't have Canada as a rival going far in a tournament where we were expected to get out of the group and make a run in the tournament. So well done, Jesse. Well done, kid from our Midwest, Racine, Wisconsin. And that was a historic run for them, and I'm sure they have a lot of good energy now going into the World Cup in 2 years. Whereas I'm going to throw it back to you. What are your thoughts on Greg, and what does that mean for the next 2 years for U.S. soccer?
It's a big move. I mean, it with how the tournament played out, you can see the reasons why U.S. soccer made the decision that they did. There was a lot of calling and I guess gnashing of teeth for that move to happen amongst the U.S. fan base. And I know that's not the only reason why you make a move, but with the way the tournament played out, not being able to get out of the group that they had in front of them, I think that's a very big disappointment. It's a big call. I was kind of 50-50 on bringing Berhalter back. I've always had this. I know I've heard it elsewhere as well, but I've always had this weird thing that I don't think U.S. or not just U.S. but any national team manager should get more than one cycle. I think you need some change going or coming out of a World Cup and into a next World Cup cycle. I like that idea of having changes, but that's just me. I know it's a weird one, but I was interested to see what Berhalter would do coming into a second World Cup cycle where the tournament would be here on home shore. So it's the level of importance is ratcheted up even more. And unfortunately, it just didn't work out in this Copa America, and it's a big move. I think now going forward, they have a huge call that they cannot wait like they did, or as long as they did last time in bringing back Berhalter. They have to put in the new manager as soon as possible, because we know there are not a whole lot of games between now and the World Cup because of the fact that we're hosting. You don't have the CONCACAF qualifying to rely on games there. So getting a new manager in for me as quick as possible is more pertinent than ever.
All right, I'm going to slightly disagree. I would rather go the right manager versus quick as possible, just
Okay.
because, to your point, you only have so much time. And so how much can you really actually affect versus making sure that in 2 years we are all in on making a run at the World Cup. And ultimately for me, obviously I know Greg personally, and I'm of the iteration that I thank him for all that he's done.
Mm-hmm.
I I look at our exit as something where we should be frustrated, all of us. I'm sure Greg is. I'm sure the players are, and I think we need to not accept it, like whatever it means, because ultimately last night Colombia played down 10 men against one of the best teams in the world. We could argue we got knocked out of the game with the Panama game where we didn't walk off the field after being up with 10 playing against 10 men against 11 against Panama, and we couldn't find a way to get out of our group. So for me, there's a cycle here where we still have to get the quality. We still have to push our players to be kind of a group and a unit. And then we've got to get them to fight in battle and understand that, like, the most important thing for this next cycle is not getting out of the group, but it's making a run on home soil of the World Cup and showing the world that we can now compete. And I know winning the World Cup would be amazing. That's a little bit like maybe too extreme. And if people don't understand how hard it is, and there's so few countries that have won World Cups, but we can make another run at a World Cup, particularly on home soil now, and go deep in this tournament. There's no doubt in my mind. So ultimately, I think our players have to really embrace that the next 2 years, whoever the manager is, they've got to come together as a group, not only the tactical side, not only the just thinking about how they're going to evolve as players and be fit, but how are they going to fight and battle like some of the teams that we've watched in this Copa America, like Uruguay, like Colombia, and actually feel like it cares to the point that they make sure we get out of a group that's was light ultimately, and there's consequences when you don't.
Yeah.
And today we're waking up to the reality of this business, which is at the end of the day about winning and about momentum for a historical World Cup that means so much financially, and it means so much to the growth of the game in this country and the pride of getting more soccer fans involved in the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned the need to get the manager right. So then who to you is the right manager? I know there's some fantasy bookings of who a lot of fans want, but who do you think is the best for that position? Maybe not just one, but name your maybe top 3, top 5 that you would.
Yeah, I do think it's early, so I'm emotional too. Like, again, when I speak right now, I'm speaking as a U.S. soccer fan, as a
Yeah.
former national team player, as somebody who maybe has a lot of gray hair, so you get a little old schooly, like, come on, guys. Oh, sorry. Work harder. Okay, hope you can bleep that out. But that's my passion coming out. Um, and so, you gravitate towards probably a little bit more, that the motivation side of getting a manager that's maybe got a little bit bigger name, somebody that you think can really affect a group of guys who are on big clubs around the world, but need to be reminded that it's about the group and it's about the selflessness of who you are. And again, I use the example Bielsa in Uruguay. It just really kind of accentuated a lot of qualities of taking superstars like Valverde and Araujo and these guys that play for Madrid and Barcelona, and you wouldn't know it. You just know that they're Uruguayan fighting for each other. So ultimately, for me, that's a great question. I don't have a list yet. I do think in this situation, the process is really important. It's really important you speak to a lot of people. I think you have to interview a lot. You learn a lot about who you are and what you are as a national team by talking to a ton of people and doing a ton of interviews. So for me, that's why I said I don't want to go quick. I want to really make sure they talk to loads of different types of people that work in MLS, people that work in Europe, people that are maybe retired but looking to work again, all of it. Do all of it. Make
Yeah.
sure you get who you think is the right person to lead us all in for the next 2 years. It's like the Timberwolves for me. We're all in right now for the next 2 years. Let's do it. I mean,
Yeah.
let's make sure we're all in.
So you mentioned that all in nature, and I know, and I referenced it, the fantasy booking, and I sort of laughed this one off because I think it's wild and preposterous, but it just seems to never go away. The link between the U.S. men's national team and former Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp. I don't think it's going to happen just because I don't know. I think it's a wild stretch to believe that Klopp would take the job after leaving Liverpool and probably wants some time off, but I'm going to put you on the spot here, Manny. Talk me into it. So it doesn't matter if you believe in this argument or not, but talk me into the fact or into the idea that Jurgen Klopp would take the U.S. men's national team job.
Yeah, Klopp, Lowe, Zidane, Pep. I all think I wake up today. Um, Take away how much money they would say they really want to make. Think
Yeah.
about like life experiences. You've got guys, and actually, the we had a discussion about with somebody about being curious about things and about experiencing things. I think every single one of those guys takes a phone call about this situation because they're like, huh, a 2 year model where it's not a club coaching where it's just 24/7 exhausting mentally. And I'm hosting one of the more iconic countries World Cups, and I look at the roster and it's very, very solid to like has potential. Maybe it's not the top 4 or 5 countries in the world between South America and Europe, but it's right on that bubble of truly being in the top 10 to 12.
Mhm.
So all of those scenarios, I think all of those names take the call because it's so intriguing and and all of those coaches are such a want to experience different life things, different emotions, different. This project is not 10 years. This project is a year and change. So ultimately, even if we hired somebody now, they wouldn't even start, I think, until January is my guess. So that's why I said a year and change. So ultimately, I think they all take the call. And then it's up to the process of the interviews and seeing, by the way, it's not one-sided. Ultimately, I hope we have people who are running this that really do the process seriously and take the best candidate that gives us all in to win in 2 years. But I think all those guys take the call for sure, which means you're in the door. Your foot's in the door.
Yeah. I think that's the most important thing is just getting your foot in the door and making an impression. And hopefully you can lure one of those guys in because I think that would be absolutely monumental getting one of those types of guys in for this tournament. I love the idea of that happening. The cynical side of me doesn't see it happening. For some reason, I can't picture it in my mind. One of those guys wanting to leave their current gigs or their time off after a really strenuous last handful of years coaching one of the top teams in the world. I don't know. Part of me doesn't see it happening, but also the fan side of me wants it to happen because I understand how good those coaches are and how fun it would be to see those guys in charge of the U.S. men's
Believe,
national team.
Jonathan. Believe whatever it is. Believe. We have 2 years now to really push ourselves as a country to say we're better than what we just showed on a world stage.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's jump into the MLS discussion, unless you got anything else you want to hit on
Oh, I
before
got it
we
off my chest. I swore and all that stuff. So we're ready to go.
we've what was this, 20 episodes in, we finally got Manny to swear on the podcast. This means that a scoreline prediction is coming soon. I feel it. I feel we'll get there. So let's jump into the recap, Manny. I know this is going to be the more difficult portion of the podcast. Recapping a 2-1 loss to the LA Galaxy. Plenty to discuss here. A back and forth affair through much of this. I think there was a good chunk of the second half where LA were just keeping the ball, and you could see the Loons' legs kind of give out and get really heavy and unable to get the ball back. And eventually that led to Peck's second goal. But your general thoughts on this match on Sunday night?
Yeah, I mean, this is the brutal side of soccer when you're in a tough spell and you have a staff and a team that I thought was set up really well. Essentially, it was a 5-4-1, kind of a middle block, but like really, it threw LA Galaxy for a loop, and you could see that they struggled with to deal with just how we were kind of set up for their front three to kind of deal with Pansel and Puig and Peck and Jovic, and I thought we did a great job. I thought it was overall the game. We battled through some tough moments. We battled through getting down. Again, I thought for large portions we played really, really well. And then you had that point at the end of the game where some subs came in and it looked like I thought we'd be the more likely team to get the win.
Mm-hmm.
And then the reality is sometimes you have these moments of brilliance against you, which I thought was one of the better goals I'd seen from a tempo and quality of technical execution in years in MLS. And you just put your hand up and say that was an amazing goal, because to me that was one of the better indefensible goals I've seen, which I rarely say. I usually talk about a player tucking in or getting in the back post or closing a player down quickly. To me, the tempo that they scored that second goal was one of the better goals I'd seen, and hard to just say, we could have done a little bit better on that. But the game was tough because mentally, I think the group, we deserved a tie or 3 points, and unfortunately didn't get it.
Yeah, it looked like going into stoppage time or heading into that area in the second half, it looked like the Loons were going to pull off something no other team in the league had been able to do this season. LA coming into the game were 6-0-0 at halftime, or in games when they led at halftime, and now they're 7-0-0, but they were minutes away from that being 7-0-1 as Teemu Pukki coming back into the lineup after a couple weeks out due to injury and international call-up, getting the goal, a good goal for him, a good, just giving a lot of space in that one. We'll start on the Loons goal and then kind of work our way around what LA Galaxy did as well throughout the match. But Teemu Pukki getting a much needed goal for him, his first game or his first goal in a couple months, just giving a lot of space to run forward, and just a nice shot from well outside the box, just curling it around John McCarthy.
Yeah, it really did. It was nice. Found a nice pocket, turned to an Adam. At the time, I think Galaxy defenders were decided to play off him, and he really took advantage of going right at him. And again, a great finish, a finish that I thought was clever because it kind of was in a way that McCarthy couldn't see the shot, so he saw it late, and it was just tucked away really nicely, and just a nice shift for Pukki. Again, he's been injured, so you're not sure about his level of fitness or even his health. And he comes on, and I think when he came on, our structure was a little bit better. Putting Sang wide, I think helped a little bit us. Our shape defensively seemed a little bit more solid when Pukki was in the middle versus in Sang wide, and it just gave us that lift. Like I said, that's where the shot in the arm for the team, because the elevation of Pukki in there was exciting. We seemed to really be even more lined up to win. Harvey came in and did a good job. Fraga came in and did a good job. Again, Boxall and Tapias had a great bounce back game from a game that I thought they maybe were a little bit off the game before. So it really was a tough pill to swallow that you walk off the field without a point or 3 points. And we started with Pukki, great goal.
Yeah, it was another one of those games where the team lose, but they didn't play bad. And it's just another one of those results in this string of results where you look at it and you're like, yeah, you probably could have gotten 1 point. You're kind of, it stinks to not get 1 point because you felt like you deserved 1 point, at least 1 point, if not 3 in that match. And it's just another one of those results, as we've talked about in this losing streak, is that it's not all games where the team just wasn't in it from the get-go. This was a game where you could tell legs kind of got heavy at the end and things started to break down a little bit in that after this run of form and this run of games. So it's a disappointing result, but plenty of positives as well to come out of it. And you mentioned the substitutions, getting some of these guys back. That's been really important for kind of overturning this run of form. It's getting some of these guys back. And the Loons will get 2 more back in Tanny and Dane St. Clair, although they didn't play a whole lot over the last month. So that's going to be another trick, is getting those guys back into game shape and game form and getting ready to play a full 90 minutes again. I don't know, that seems to be kind of the big thing weighing on me, is that now that we got them back, how do you get them going again? Because they haven't really played a whole lot over the last month.
Yeah, I mean, TBD when they get back. Obviously, there's a third place game on Saturday.
Yep.
I would hope, expect them probably to get some minutes in that game.
Yeah.
And that's, so we miss some Houston, and then you're looking at our 2 games next week before the Leagues Cup break. So ultimately, I think it's just important mentally that we're learning from this last game. We're not accepting that it's not okay just to lose and then say, oh, but we played well. So I think that model is there, and I think getting the whole group back allows the group to work with the staff on the strengths of what we've done and really ask honest questions about how we stop a losing streak and get back to our winning ways.
Side tangent before we get back to the Galaxy discussion. Do we like third place games? I'm not a big fan of them.
Jonathan, thank you. Why? What does it mean?
Okay, thank you.
Like what that this has been for decades now. It
doesn't make sense to me.
But let's just break it down from the weird reality of the structure of world soccer, and how guys sign contracts with us. They play for their clubs. We pay their salaries and have this extra thing that we allow them to go to, which is great and really builds like momentum and career and trajectory and great stuff. But certainly it's just one extra game for potential injuries, for things that you don't like that affect, the club. Like,
Yeah.
There's nothing about this that makes sense to me at all.
Yeah.
Zero.
I've never liked third place games, even in the World Cup. It doesn't make sense to me. Like,
It's
decide who's third place by who lost to the winner of the final. That's who gets third place, as it should be, as it is in every other sport, it feels like.
Yeah, or just don't have a third place. I don't get it. Like, there's a
Those
final.
games aren't good anyways. I mean,
Yeah.
the teams, like, you could tell the players most of the time just kind of want to go home and just be done with the tournament after getting so close to the final. They don't want to play another game that generally means nothing, I can imagine.
I can tell you one trivia I'd lose is I don't know one single third place winner in a World Cup. I really don't. I would lose. I can't think of one.
Yeah, it just doesn't. It's never made sense to me. I always thought it was a weird concept. It was a, pardon my phrase, a dumb concept. But yeah, I've never been a fan of it.
Yeah, I'm there with you, and it affects us personally. Like I said, we should have our guys back this weekend, and we don't.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, so back, excuse me, back to the LA Galaxy game, and looking at how this game broke down, you could see, you could see what Ricky Pooch meant to that midfield for LA Galaxy. He was just on form all night and had a really good game. And what did you take away from his game, and how the Loons played against him on Sunday night?
Well, I certainly think he's so hard to play with. What a skill, what a talent. He really is one of those guys that just finds the ball and doesn't look like he's quick or clever or they're going to win the ball off him, but he gets it off his foot so quickly. So certainly offensively, he's really tough to handle. I think we've handled him well in that he kind of goes all over the place. So he loses a little bit of his structure, and that gives us chances to go forward or get our own tempo on the ball. So I thought we did a good job of, at times I thought the first goal, we probably could have been better on him, and we could have kind of been not so tucked in. So they got, the ball wide and the cross in. But for the most part, I thought we handled him somewhat pretty well. But he had 2 big moments that led to 2 passes that led to the pass to the goal. But I thought on the flip end, we kind of hurt the Galaxy because, again, when he's not structured, we can kind of win the midfield in a different way and get numbers forward and move the ball ourselves. So what a joy to watch, though. Like I said, it's one of those ones where I would tell our fan base he is even better live sometimes because he's got this small, wiry body, but really is fun player to watch live for sure. So, and he, like I said, he didn't get the assist, but he got the second assist on both goals. And that second goal, he was part of what I thought was one of the better goals I've seen in MLS this year.
Yeah, that goal was incredible from not just a timing standpoint, but from how it broke down. Is there a way to stop something like that? I know you said it was one of the more indefensible goals that you've seen, and it was just a very well played run of play there by LA Galaxy to create that goal and score that goal. But is there a way to stop that, and what could the Loons have done differently to make sure that didn't happen and they got into stoppage time with a 1-1 draw?
Yeah, I'm sure there's always ways to stop goals, and probably for me, I meant more like higher up the field in terms
Yeah.
of us getting numbers up and closing. But I think even then we tried to foul Ricky, and he got the ball wide. Again, I'm just kind of going through my head, but ultimately, I like talking about it because that world-class tempo of getting the ball moving, and then the ball was played in a way to the outside back where Joseph's going to turn and close, and then you have a world-class touch. I mean, the touch was just out of this world good. And then the next touch was out of this world good because the tempo is so fast now that it's so hard for our guys to box, defend, and react. And ultimate, by the next thing you know, they've scored a goal that I think had a high tempo, high world-class touches. And really, that's why I said I felt like in the end it could in defense. Well, certainly there was probably a breakdown higher at the field where you're allowing the ball to get in those spaces. But I just thought we sometimes have to put your hand up and say, wow,
Yeah.
that's a really, really good goal.
So it ended up being a 2-1 loss for the Loons, now in a hefty losing streak, unfortunately. What were some of the things for you? And I know we've mentioned that there's still some positives in this match because they played well, probably deserved a point, if not 3, with how they played through portions of that match. What are some of the things for you that they can build off of, that Minnesota can build off of going into another run of games where it's short turnarounds coming up again?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think with Houston coming up this weekend, we've got to figure out a way to dominate the midfield and tempo and heat, where it's not just all about battling and winning it, but it's about when do we go, when do we make sure we're winning the ball in tough spots, when do we sit a little bit deeper. And so I think one of the positives I thought in the game, Hassani and Brand were outstanding. I thought they really won a lot of battles. I thought they moved the ball well. I thought they, had to absorb some great passing between Ricky Puig and the Galaxy midfield, and they did, and they kept their shape, which is hard to do when they're just moving the ball quickly like they were. And so I think we need that type of mentality and battling in Houston, where it's even hotter and it's even harder to decide when to up the tempo either defensively or offensively, and then still move the ball well and make sure we're getting numbers forward when we need to kind of create chances. So that's a big one for me. Certainly, Bongi and Singh have had some liveliness to them. I thought the structure looked really good when Pookie was in there, particularly with them wide. So it'll be interesting this weekend to see if we kind of go with a different lineup, or we go with the back 5 or a 5-3-2 up top. I think there's a lot of tactical decisions that can be made prior to this weekend. That's going to allow us to have a little bit of a different look probably than the Galaxy game.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch coming up this weekend. 7:30 p.m. kickoff between Minnesota United and the Houston Dynamo. 7 p.m. pre-match show with Dan Terrar and myself on 1500 ESPN. You can watch that game, as I said, 7:30 on MLS Season Pass. Before we get to that game, final thoughts, Manny, on the Loons 2-1 loss to LA Galaxy.
Again, it's really tough game and pill to swallow after such a long losing streak, and I think this losing streak has been interesting in that it doesn't seem like it's been like just poor soccer straight through. It's been maybe 1 or 1.5 games of really poor soccer, and then a lot of it's moments, and a lot of it is some good soccer and unluckiness. I think I said, though, you kind of have to be honest and say, at the end of the day, like the Galaxy game, hand up, they scored a great goal, but we should have probably walked off that field with a point or 3 points. So mentally now we have to recover this week. And I think it's more about not only a good roster in Houston, but probably about the heat and how we handle that. I get caught getting older and being like nervous about it, but ultimately you just got to take it head on. I mean, this group has to know that this league is tough. You play in a ton of different climates at different times of the year. Our guys have to come in not worrying too much about it, but also realizing it will be a factor. But if we allow it to mentally overwhelm us, we're in trouble, and we're mentally a little fragile right now. We have a huge losing streak going on, and we just lost a really tough game in LA. So this is why I think it's so important the guys galvanize, start believing themselves, and really embrace the adversity of this weekend, which won't be easy.
No, sure, certainly won't. So now we'll move on to that game, but I forgot to mention this at the top of the show. Hands up, bad hosting by me. I forgot to tease this at the beginning of the show. We'll be joined by Wil Trapp coming up after this break to preview the game against Houston and the game against DC United, as well as talk about maybe best dressed Loons and other stuff. We'll stick with us on the backside of that. We'll preview this upcoming weekend of games across Major League Soccer and make our predictions. That's coming up next here on the Matchday Preview. Just because the Loons are away doesn't mean you have to watch the match from home. With Loons Watch Spots presented by Coors Light, you can find a piece of that Allianz Field atmosphere at some of your favorite Twin Cities locations. Check out the full list of locations and upcoming watch parties at MNUFC.com/Loons Watch Spots. And now joined by Loons midfielder Wil Trapp. Will, how are we doing today? How's the body feeling? I know that's the most pressing question Loons fans will be wondering about as you join the show today.
Yeah, Jonathan, I'm feeling great. Obviously, it's never fun to be injured, but when you get to expose yourself to a little bit more work every single day, feels like that road to recovery is coming along well. So feeling really good, just taking it one day at a time to improve.
Absolutely. So let's jump into this preview.
Hey, Jonathan, I just wanted to throw out, Will and I got a chance to catch up a little bit yesterday, and I just thought it was really interesting. I thought it bears at least one quick question to Will, and we were chatting about, the livelihood of your body when you get injured and how you handle that mentally, and how you handle it as a team that, is in a little bit of a tough spell right now, and they're looking for leadership. And certainly, one of the strengths of the team this year has been the leadership. So I guess my question to you, Will, is a little bit the same I had yesterday. Certainly for especially you, somebody I think that, is so detail oriented with your body and making sure that you are always fit and hungry and just have that sense of making sure that you are as fit as you can be for the group. How is it when you're injured? How does that feel, and where does that go in that mental space in your head?
Yeah, I think I said it to you yesterday, but I'll repeat it here. It's like you go through different stages of grief of like, oh man, how did this happen? What did I do wrong? Et cetera, et cetera. And that's a normal reaction, but I also don't think it's the most helpful reaction. Because granted, like injuries pop up because of a myriad of things. Sometimes it's just a lot of games and not a whole lot of squad rotation. Sometimes it's imbalances and weakness in your body, whatever it may be. But ultimately where I quickly try to take myself is like, what can I do now to get back to the field? Because I think injuries, whether they're short, whether they're long, all you can really can control is the step-by-step daily work to get you back. So on the one hand, you get that like quick moment of frustration, anger, whatever it may be. But what I've tried to tell myself and teach myself is just get on with the actionable steps. So I think it's always difficult when the group feels like they're in a little bit of it's not even a little bit of a tough moment, but in a tough moment as we are right now, and you can't contribute on the field or in training. But again, that's not helpful. What's helpful is thinking about how you can just get back healthy and ready to train.
Yeah. Before we jump into this preview with Houston, I kind of want to ask you, as a player on the inside, in the middle of this run of form, what's the mindset been in the locker room over these last couple of weeks? I know it's been tough. There's been outside circumstances. I know you guys aren't going to let that be let those be excuses for why things have happened. But what's the mindset been within the locker room over these last couple of weeks?
Yeah, Jonathan, I think there's been a few touch points we've had that the group is grabbing onto. The first one being, yes, these circumstances are a little bit out of our control, but we're not going to make the excuse for it. We're just going to sit there and put our heads down and continue to try to improve, try to take what we have in front of us as opportunities to hopefully get points, as we haven't in the past 6 games. But we always get a fresh opportunity. And I think the focus has been take the next opportunity. And I think when you look at the performances, and Manny and I were talking about this yesterday, it's not as if everything's been terrible and like we're losing and it's been shockingly bad. That's not necessarily the case. Granted, there's moments where it could be better, and there's certainly moments that we can draw upon as positive. So I think the staff has done a really good job of staying level, and taking the good moments and then teaching on the moments that could be improved. And that's ultimately what we can do day by day. Similar to injury rehab, here's the controllables, here's the steps that we can take as a group every day in training. Let's get after those, because the rest of it will take care of itself in many ways. Dane will come back, Kenny will come back, guys will get healed up and back into the team. That stuff is peripheral to the work on the training field every day, and then what we put onto the field on Saturdays, and in this case Wednesdays coming up.
Yeah, I think certainly, and Jonathan, I can help segue as to Houston, which is where I know we want to get to, but just looking over the last couple of weeks and the tough losses, they're all different. And I think you're right, Will. I don't think there's a pattern of bad play. I think there's a pattern of not quite getting 90 minutes of complete soccer, and for a lot of reasons, whether it's Wil Trapp getting injured in warm up in Portland, or whether it's, I thought, an outstanding 90 minutes in LA playing against a very good team, and then, them scoring an outstanding goal at the end of the game versus us getting a chance when Fraga had it. So I certainly think, though, that leads to mentally now a really tough challenge this weekend in a place that is probably more about the heat sometimes than the roster. But in some ways going to be more challenging because the reality of playing in that type of environment is not easy. So, Jonathan, with that, I'll pass it to you. But my segue is that mentally, this is a tough one this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And you mentioned the heat. That's always been a difficult thing, especially in Texas. And that's just going to be something that both teams will have to deal with. It'll be a fun one for sure. Let's jump into this preview against the Houston Dynamo. Last result for them was a 3-2 loss to Real Salt Lake. They were supposed to have a game against LAFC, but weather conditions in Houston prevented that one from happening. Hopefully everyone in Houston is safe and okay. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody in Houston dealing with the flooding and everything going out there. But Houston, they are in a bit of a run of form. That loss ended a 6-match streak of getting points without a loss. That was an incredible run for them that they've jumped up in the Western Conference standings.
We trace it back to when we played them at home. It's a team that loves to have the ball. They try to kill you with passes. They're not always the most direct. But now that, Herrera didn't play when we hosted them here, but with Herrera back in the lineup, they always have the dynamism of a playmaker. They're just a solid, smart, cagey team that has quality. And I think anytime you play them there, especially in the heat, it's a challenge, especially because they love to have the ball. So I say that, but then I also think about results we've gotten there in the past, when it is the heat index says 112 degrees and you feel like it's the end of the world. But we have been able to get results. Look at last year. They had majority of the ball, but we won the game. In years prior, I feel like it's been a similar modicum of operation for us, but it doesn't make it an easy opponent, especially after a loss for them, where they're going to feel the desire to get back to the run of form that they had prior to the Real Salt Lake game.
Yeah, well, I guess, you kind of mentioned the strength potentially of their midfield. Carrasquilla, Herrera, and Bassi all love to kind of move the ball and are pretty clever in there. So certainly I know for us, that's an important area of the field that we have to essentially win to control the tempo with the heat. Just in your experience, how do you approach a game like this in terms of making sure you feel like you can get through it 90 minutes effectively and hopefully not take too many breaks that let the team down individually or collectively, but just how do you approach it? How does it go into your mindset?
Yeah, I think it's always one where you have to say, okay, there will be moments where they're just going to have the ball and we're going to have to weather the storm. That's just the reality, with their heat acclimation and ours not being quite the same. And also it's just a stylistic thing, I think, for their midfield. Lots of rotation. They like to create a little box with Bassi, Herrera, Carrasquilla, and then Artur as well. And they manipulate the opponents pretty well through that. So I think for us, whether it's center back stepping out of the back three, or it's the midfielders being very clear on which holes they're closing and how they're covering one another. All of that plays a massive role into nullifying what they can do with the ball. But I think if you look at the game we played them here at home, the intensity with which we attacked and created chances, and especially in the second half, was something we really drew upon after that game. It was like, here are some positives. Here are things that, yes, we lost the game, but we felt like we had the upper hand as the game was going on with the intensity of our play, the way we were being direct and aggressive moving forward. So we have to take elements of that, but you can't do it all given what the circumstances will be with the humidity.
You mentioned that game a couple months ago, 3 months ago now, against the Dynamo. Fortunately, a 2-1 loss at Allianz Field. I know it's been a while. It's been that 3 months, but and you mentioned some of the things you do take away from that game. With the time that has elapsed since then and how different these teams are at where they are as opposed to where they were back then, how much are you able to take from that game and kind of put it into this game coming up on the weekend?
I mean, there's always elements. We're a different team, but we're also not a completely different team, right? So the
Right.
principles of how Eric wants to play, those are always what we're going to try to put on the field. So I don't think it alters a whole lot from how we're going to approach the game. Yes, player availability, current form is something that you have to take into account. But overall, I think the idea of how we want to set up, and if anything, we've had more time to train under Eric's tutelage and understand what he wants more. And that's a benefit for us. That was an early game in his tenure, and we're still kind of figuring things out. Whereas now we've had the time to be able to sink our teeth into who we want to be as a group and what we want to put on the field. So you take some, you have to adapt as well. But I ultimately think that it'll be an exciting game, like you touched on before, John.
Manny?
No, like I said, I think that the biggest challenge for me looking at the game this weekend, and combined with Wil on this phone on the call, I have to talk about him and his mentality, because he's had a career that he's had because he's been one of these players in this league that really demands excellence and expectation of excellence, whether it's his mental focus or whether it's his physical focus or his technical focus has been outstanding. And it's really allowed him to have a great career. And I look at the challenges this weekend mentally, because we had such a great game in LA, but we dropped points at the end of the game. And we've had a nice long losing streak now that, I don't think is normally just we're playing bad. So in some ways it's mentally weighing us even more about how do we go in this weekend and how do we navigate the challenges and whether it's the Heat or a good roster in Houston. So to get the points, but ultimately for me, going back to Wil, I do like when we have Wil in this audience to talk about Wil, not only his leadership that he provides this club, but also just like to become such a high level athlete and the kind of discipline that's required. There's a lot of correlation between what needs to happen this weekend and kind of the metaphor for Wil's whole career. And I don't know where Wil stands with that, but I just like talking about that. So Wil, a little bit on that note, how do you approach your professional side, like in the mentality individually? Where do you see yourself in that alignment that I just kind of presented?
Yeah, well, I mean, thanks, Randy. You're gassing me up. I don't know if I deserve it all, but I would say for me, it's been interesting. Like, you go through these seasons quite literally and figuratively in your career where you're learning a lot. And maybe sometimes you don't feel like it in this example, in this 6-game stretch. Does it feel like we're learning a lot? It just feels like we're getting dunked on. But that's not the truth. The truth is really like there's so many lessons that you can uncover every day, and being curious about how we can improve individually, collectively is ultimately, for me, what I feel like has helped me play as long as I have. And in many ways, it's rediscovering the joy and the passion we have for this game. Because ultimately, I think where I've been fortunate is I have a mind that kind of loves to work and have discipline and do those things, but I can overcorrect sometimes into that, where I lose the smiling and the joy and just the love for the game. So for me, it's like, especially as I've gotten older, it's realizing you can have all the discipline, you can have all the intensity and the focus, and that's super important. But you also need to marry that to it's just a game, and it's the best game in the world. So I think for me, it's been a fun kind of evolution, even just this year, of enjoying it, slowing it down more. And yes, bad moments come, and no one hates those more than me. But it's also like, okay, well, there's wisdom in this. Let's take it. Let's get better. Because ultimately, when you're like postured that way, the group will come out of it, and we're going to come out of it stronger. And I said to Eric, this moment, if we think about it and orient ourselves the right way toward it, we become bulletproof after it, because basically everything that could go wrong has gone wrong. And if we can take the lumps and keep on going, that bodes well for what a team can achieve ultimately.
I love that mentality.
Yep.
Just
Great.
taking your lumps now and then knowing that it's going to give you, I guess, armor going into the future. I love that. I know we've got a short time with you, Wil. So just before we send you off, 2 quick questions from me. Quick preview on DC United, because we will play them next before Manny and I record again. So quick preview from them. And then second question coming up after that.
Okay. Yeah, DC United. I mean, I think you look at it's a team with a stellar striker in Benteke, who's always going to be a handful. I think his hold-up play, his ability to score goals in multiple ways, makes him a challenge. But they're an industrious team. I think they bring intensity, and they found ways to be competitive in what's a difficult Eastern Conference. So, yeah, that'll be an interesting one, especially off short rest for us coming off this Houston game. But we need to get back to winning ways in front of our fans.
Yeah, it'll be a good opponent to do that against. Hopefully, get the win this Wednesday and get another win, or this Saturday and then get another win on Wednesday against a team that is winless in their last 11. But my final question, I don't know if Manny has another one after this, but last time you and I talked on this podcast, we kind of started something with talking about the fits with the team. So, so far this year, who's the best dressed Loon? And you can't choose yourself. Man. You can't choose yourself.
No, I wouldn't even put myself in there. I don't know, man. There's been some good ones. I think Sung Bin for me he just has there's a little bit he's like a K-pop band. He certainly has a K-pop, but he's got it's higher level than people realize. So I respect the subtlety and the quality of what Sung he's got going on.
This is gonna sound like a weird comment, but this is something Dan and I brought up on the radio broadcast from time to time, is that before the matches, we're down in the hallway preparing to do an interview with a player and the head coach. And every once in a while, a player will walk by. No offense to you or any of your other teammates, but Song Bin is maybe the best smelling player that we've ever smelled.
Yeah.
I don't know what
turned a little bit
using,
different. I didn't know this. You're going with this, Jonathan.
No, that's important. That's important too. It's the total package. He's got great hair. His skin's incredible, and he smells awesome, and he dresses great. He's winning, dude.
Again, I know that's a weird comment, but that's something that's always stuck out to Dan whenever he passes us by. It's like we look, and normally that hallway smells a little bit like a locker room, but he walks by, It's like, where did that come from? All right, Manny, I'll hand it off to you to close it up.
No, I don't have anything good, but I really appreciate it. Well, it's been great talking to you here. A lot of good insight for me personally. So, get all the best getting healthy and getting back on the field.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Thanks, Wil. All right, that was our conversation with Wil Trapp. Thanks, Wil, for joining us here on the Matchday Preview. Manny, let's talk about these games coming up this weekend. Another exciting edition of MLS coming up this weekend. Let's choose 3 games to pick. We're not going to predict the Houston, Minnesota one, because I don't think we normally choose that one. But let's choose. I like this one. LAFC Columbus. This should be a barn burner if I've ever seen one for the weekend. This one at LAFC.
At LAFC, I'm going to take LAFC right now, but you are correct. That is a 2 very, very hot teams playing very well right now. And go ahead.
I was just gonna say both these managers will most likely get calls, going back to that conversation we had at the top of the show for the U.S. men's national team job. I think U.S. Soccer would be remiss not to call either of those guys.
Yeah, I think they're probably in that domestic list for sure.
Yeah, I like LAFC in this one as well. A cross-country game for Columbus, going to be tough for them, and LAFC are just in one of the best runs of form we've seen in the league this season. That's going to be a tough game in Los Angeles. I like LAFC in that one. The next game that we'll choose, FC Dallas, LA Galaxy, another Western Conference affair. This one at Dallas.
I'm going to go with a tie.
Ooh,
Yeah.
just a road tie for LA Galaxy and Dallas getting the draw at home against the Galaxy. I like that. I think that's going to be a tough one for Dallas, though. I like LA Galaxy from what we saw on Sunday. I think it's just a very, very good team that has found its run of form under Greg Vanney this season. I think I'm going to choose LA Galaxy on the road here. We'll go to the Eastern Conference and do DC United Nashville. I know this one isn't at the top of many people's watch lists because of the runs of forms that those teams are on, but Minnesota play DC United coming up next Wednesday. Your prediction for this one? This one at DC. DC, again, an 11-match winless run.
Yeah, I think probably just with the reality of the parity of this league, I'm going to have to go with DC just because you just said 11 matches winless at home.
That is a ridiculous streak.
Yeah, it probably gives them a chance to get some points against a Nashville team that, is got a new coach, but isn't even going to be there for 3 more weeks. So they're kind of in this weird state of what's going to happen. So I'm going to go with DC.
Yeah, I think I'm going DC there as well. Not a good time for them to break their streak coming into Allianz Field next Wednesday. That will be another fun one for sure. But Manny, good stuff from you this week. Good stuff from Wil Trapp joining the podcast, and excited
really
to
nice conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff from him. Excited to see how these games play out coming up on Saturday and Wednesday. As I said, MLS season pass this Saturday, July 13th, Minnesota at Houston, 7:30 p.m. kickoff on Apple TV, 7 p.m. pre-match show with Dan Terrar and myself on 1500 ESPN. Manny, we'll talk to you next week.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Loons fans. We'll talk to you next week. Thank you to the production staff of Kyle Hayward, Grace Dearson, and Evan Entler for putting this on every week. Loons fans, we'll talk to you next week.